Welcome to You Decide. I'm your host, Errol Lewis. My guest this week is New York City Councilman Chi Ossé. He represents the 36th district, that includes all of Bed-Stuy, or nearly all of it, and North Crown Heights as well. He's here to talk about neighborhoods that have seen a troubling rise in what is called deed theft. He's going to explain what that's all about and who's being targeted and why he's taking action against it. He's one of the youngest members of the City Council in New York history, and we've got a lot to talk about, so let's get to it. Welcome to the podcast. Great to see you.
Thank you so much for having me on. Listen, I'm surprised that there is no difference between your podcast voice and your TV voice. I thought there would be a differentiation, but I guess you can't do that.
No. Exactly right. Let's start with your latest project, and then I want to get into some of what happened in the last session of the council, where you did some amazing work, and the politics of the election and so forth. Explain what is going on with deed theft and how it came to your attention.
Absolutely. So I've been sitting in this council seat for 4 years now, grew up in central Brooklyn, and have seen my neighborhood change, as did many Black New Yorkers, and many Black New Yorkers are seeing their communities change every single year, if not every single day. A reason of that is gentrification and displacement. And one of those types of displacement is this issue called deed theft. You don't really hear it throughout the housing crises talk, right? It's something that I think flies under the radar a little bit more unless you are living in central Brooklyn or in brownstone Brooklyn. What it essentially is when predatory agents or predatory actors steal the ownership on paper of a deed from a homeowner without them knowing of it. This can take the form of a solicitor knocking on the door of a senior, telling them to sign a bunch of paperwork, telling them that they're going to pay off their mortgage or pay for a repair. And within that stack of papers is a piece of paper that allows that homeowner to sign over their deed. This is a concerted effort that these predatory actors are doing and have been doing for some time. In the past 10 years, there have been thousands of complaints made to the State Attorney General's office, the OCA, about people's deeds being stolen. And it's very hard to prove when your deed is stolen when it's actually been stolen. And now we're putting into work a real initiative, a concerted effort to sound the alarm on deed theft, to stop it once and for all.
So what actions are you proposing to fight back?
So it's a two-step process. In government, and what I've realized over the past 4 years is there's this bit of hot potato that elected officials and agencies play when it comes to enforcing deed theft. What I found over the past 4 years is that the best strategy in order to stop deed theft is by applying some pressure on the governor and asking her to use some of her powers on implementing a temporary stay on evictions or an eviction moratorium for those who are dealing with pending deed theft cases or foreclosure fraud cases. And the second part of that is until that eviction moratorium is released from the governor, we need for the governor to implement a cease and desist zone, a citywide cease and desist zone, so solicitations cannot be harassed upon Black seniors, on homeowners across the city of New York. In addition to that, we're calling for the governor to pass and sign into law the LLC Transparency Act. So when those who are committing deed theft cannot hide behind shell companies, we are calling for the governor to add more funding to the homeowner, help desk, so that homeowners have the resources that they need in order to hire lawyers when they're dealing with potential deed theft cases. There's a plethora of different asks that we're asking in the second part of this initiative, but first and foremost, we're asking for an eviction moratorium.
Okay. So now, with those different actions, why is the governor the person to do it? I didn't even realize she had that power. She can pause evictions?
Yeah, so there's precedence here, right? During former Governor Cuomo, during the pandemic, the governor issued a state of emergency, and through that state of emergency, he was able to implement an eviction moratorium. With the same precedence, we were asking for the governor to explore the various different tools within her legal toolbox to put in place an eviction moratorium. This is looking into, but not solely, 756A, into Section 5519, as well as CPLR 2201. There are legal standings that exist within the governor's powers where she's able to implement targeted eviction moratoriums. And we want her to use these powers so that we can end this displacement that we're seeing of Black homeowners until we get to the root cause of what's causing deed theft.
When you talk about eviction, are you talking about the pausing the eviction of people who live in the homes of somebody whose deed has been stolen?
Yes.
Even if, what if there is no tenant? What about that homeowner?
So, I mean, it mainly pertains to homeowners who don't have tenants, right? It's homeowners who have had their deeds allegedly stolen, where the person who stole their deed is utilizing, the marshal's office or sometimes the courts on trying to evict the homeowners who are currently there. Included within, the second part of what we're calling on the governor to do is we need more overreach over our judicial system. Some of these judges are not aware of some of the laws that have been passed over the past 5 years that would help us enforce deed theft. We are calling on the governor as well as OCA to take a deeper look at the training that some of these judges undergo, as well as providing some oversight in terms of if there's any corruption or malintent that is happening within our courts when it comes to these deed theft cases.
I remember many years ago seeing some cases of it, and I was startled at how easy it was, at least at that time. I think some of it has been tightened up, that you could go down to the city clerk's office and just file a piece of paper. Nobody would stop you. And it was presumed that everything was in order, and people could just go in and create a contest for somebody's property, saying like, look, no, I own your property, without any real sort of backup. I think it's not quite that bad now, but it sounds like there's still a lot of problems.
Absolutely. I mean, in some cases that is still happening today. And if you are, an older senior, if you're someone who does not necessarily know your rights, which is usually most of the people who are targeted within these cases. I mean, for example, a couple of years ago, my grandmother, she had a stroke. She was in her early 90s, still lived in her home in Crown Heights before she passed. And up until the day she passed away, there were people still knocking on her door, telling her that she had to pay off her mortgage and that they would help when she paid off her mortgage, 20 years ago, right? So this is something that many New Yorkers are dealing with. More specifically, Black New Yorkers, older Black women, and sounding the alarm on this, applying some much needed attention, and asking the governor for some help for a problem that has been persistent within Black communities is the strategy we're taking in order to stop deed theft.
This has been brought to the Brooklyn District Attorney and a number of other law enforcement agencies who say that they don't necessarily have the resources or the sophistication, frankly, to sort of create what has to be really a separate unit that just focuses on this. And to try and bring criminal penalties, it doesn't rise to the same level as robbery and kidnapping and murder and the other things that they're supposed to be working on, right?
So that's another part of what we're working on the city level. So while we're applying some light pressure on the governor to implement a temporary stay on evictions, I will be advocating for funding to go towards district attorney's offices. I just met with the district attorney of Brooklyn around this issue alongside the People's Coalition to stop deed theft, to explore the options of opening up deed theft units within district attorney's offices. Because it's a convoluted issue, some of these, attorneys may have heard of it, but don't know how to particularly pursue and enforce some of the laws that exist on the state level to protect folks from deed theft, which is why we want a specific unit within district attorney's offices that are focused on deed theft.
You've got to have a specialized unit because, first of all, there's a limited universe of players, and you get to know them. And then there's like 4 or 5 different variations on it, but you have to be familiar with all of them. Mayor Mamdani made a campaign promise last year, I remember you were there with him, to create an Office of Deed Theft Prevention. What's the status of that? And where would that office be? Where in government is that going to sit?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I stood with him for that announcement. We've yet to have a conversation or a follow-up conversation about that, but I'm here to be a partner with the mayor on making sure that office is opened up. I'm not sure where exactly it would be opened within his administration, but I'm ready right now to start exploring how to open up that office and how to start preventing some of these scams that we're seeing within all of our communities in the city.
Okay, his people will see this, and it'll be one more thing in their inbox. They've got a pretty thick inbox already. In your first term in office, you passed the Fairness in Apartment Rental Expenses Act, which limits or bars, in a lot of cases, exploitative broker fees. You did it over the strenuous objections of the Real Estate Board of New York, which is one of the most powerful business organizations in the city. Did that turn out to be easier than you thought, or were you so new that you didn't realize that, like, freshman council members are not supposed to be taking on the real estate board?
Well, the thing is, maybe I made it look easy, but it was pretty hard. I tried to pass it within the first session, and it was killed in committee, right? There was a chairperson of the Consumer and Worker Protections Committee who did not let it get a hearing. So it was not that easy, and I was learning a lot of my first lessons within politics and politicking. But I had to get creative and thought outside of the box and utilize social media as a means to really push the bill forward. We gained a lot of public attention on the bill and honed in that public attention on the powers of the city council. We had young people of all ages, but the general public calling their elected officials, telling them to bring it to a hearing, telling them to vote on the bill. It was the first time, I think, in New York City that we blended this mix of old school organizing and new school organizing, of working with unions and politicians as well as with the public through social media on getting something real passed.
Did any of your colleagues look at you sideways and say, look, I don't appreciate you telling 20 of my constituents to call me and badger me. You could just pull me aside and we could talk about it over lunch.
Well, I always I talked to them aside over lunch and asked them to sign on to the bill, but no one has said that to my face, but I'm sure they've said it behind my back.
Well, let's talk a little bit about that social media. It's easy for us older people to say, oh, he's just part of that young digital generation. This is how they communicate. But there's some skill here. There's some creativity. There's some thoughtfulness. Not every 20-something professional has the kind of skill and savvy that you've been able to show with that.
Well, that's very kind of you. I grew up using the internet. I don't speak another language fluently, but if I did, I would be the internet. And because of that, it felt very natural to use social media as a means to communicate about, my work and my job. I think half of the work we do as elected officials is, the bills and the constituent services and the land use deals that come across our desk. And the other half, or a large chunk, is communicating what we do to the people and also what resources exist in the city for the people, which is something that we're seeing the mayor do right now and he's doing it really well.
That first series that you did, or the first one I noticed, was called Why Shit Not Working, right? where you were explaining why the subway system isn't doing what it's supposed to do, right? Whose idea was that?
Yeah, it was my former comms director, longtime work partner, Elijah Fox. And the reason we came up with that is because, especially for me, I feel like being a city council member, you're one of the most accessible levels of government. Like, anyone can kind of walk into my office, though I really should not be saying that right now, but anyone could really
I see you on the street. I mean, we catch you in the laundromat, all over the place.
Anyone could really, you'll see me, you know what I mean? And because of that, and because I also use social media really well, I think I'm very visible for many people who are maybe not used to politics and politicians. And because of that, sometimes we get a lot of blame for things that exist or that's under the jurisdiction of our state representatives or even our federal representatives. So I found this series not only as a means to educate people about the city and why shit in the city doesn't work, but also to tell people that sometimes not everything's my fault. You know what I mean? So telling people why the subway is not working through an educational lens, while also highlighting the fact that the state is responsible for the MTA. Was kind of the thought process through that, while also entertaining people and bringing people into the fold.
But what's interesting in that is that you're sort of defecting from something that a lot of your colleagues do, which is to try and put up a brave, united front. And there's nothing wrong with that. To sort of act as if, okay, there is somebody in charge here and I'm part of it and we more or less kind of know what we're doing and you should trust us and maybe even defer to us here and there. You're basically saying, you know what, I'm not with that. This stuff's not working. I'm not going to pretend like it is. And here's the problem.
I mean, I think being as transparent as you possibly can be as an elected official will earn you more trust with the public, right? I think I came into this job very much as a citizen who was angry at government, and even some of that anger at government maybe has isolated me in politics in some shapes or forms. But I try to bring a level of honesty and humanity to governance and to my job, and a part of that is pulling the curtain back and showing people what's behind it, whether it's nice and shiny or
why did you run for office? How'd you get into this?
I mean, it was really during the summer of 2020. I remember just wanting to leave my home after the murder of George Floyd. And for a lot of young people in that time, I remember, I was working in nightlife prior to the pandemic. And when the pandemic hit, obviously that entire industry was turned upside down. A couple of years before that, I had to drop out of college after my father passed away. It was a very weird time in my life where I was figuring out what was next and also feeling like I didn't know how much time we had left on this earth given the pandemic. And, it felt like the end of the world, which is something that I've gotten used to over the past couple of years. But yeah, I left my house to protest because I felt like I had nothing to lose after George Floyd was murdered. Was attending protests, was speaking up at protests. People were listening to what I was saying. I started like organizing with other young people on the ground, not necessarily on a national scale, but aiming to, change the narrative of what protesters within New York were aiming to do at the time. And we were honing in on the powers of the city government and the city council more specifically, especially on their vote of the police budget. And when I found that, my city council member didn't vote on the budget in the way that I would have, my naive 22-year-old, like, renegade self was like, fuck it, I'll run for office then. And like really I didn't really know what I was getting into, but like had this passion and this heart for wanting to see change, and it felt like change on the local level was the most tangible, and in a way it was like therapeutic to yearn and fight for that change that not only within my community but across the city. As someone who grew up in New York, like I wasn't just chanting Black Lives Matter when it came to the sense of police injustice, but it came to the sense of gentrification and displacement and the housing crisis, sanitation services within Central Brooklyn, and it really helped form my drive to run for the seat that I now represent and have been representing for now a third term.
You mentioned your late father, which I think some of my listeners know as Combat Jack, who was a very talented broadcaster in his own right. He was an attorney, I believe, right?
Yeah.
And he just decided to get into broadcasting. Yeah. And it was very listenable, very nuanced, very layered, and very interesting. And I imagine you must have absorbed some of that.
Yeah, what I really appreciated, or what I've always been a fan of my dad in terms of what he did, is he found the intersection between politics and culture, which is something that I find to be a North Star within the work that I do, right? He would be talking to, Cardi B and finding a way to, Cardi B, I guess, is a bit more politically active than maybe other people within hip hop, but he would find a way to highlight not only her work and her work in hip hop, but also its connections to politics, right? And societal change. And I think the largest movements that have taken place within this country and sometimes the world have been done within that intersection of politics and culture, which has, again, always been my North Star in terms of how I navigate this work that I do. Oh,
no, that is a big story to be told, especially in Brooklyn, where there was always kind of a sort of a Black cultural arts movement running alongside the political change that was going on. More recently, you joined the Democratic Socialists of America, and that was in the context of planning to run against Hakeem Jeffries, the congressman for the area. By analogy, isn't that almost like siphoning off some of the equity that had been built up by him and the voters over a certain amount of time?
Elaborate on that.
Well, I saw deed theft compared with sort of trading away the equity of Black and brown communities, people losing the wealth that they had acquired and worked for generations to sort of stock up. By analogy, the political career of Hakeem Jeffries has been one of running, losing, running again, challenging the establishment, finally getting into office, accumulating some seniority, making some connections nationally, to the point where he's within a few months of becoming the Speaker of the House. Nobody's perfect. No official is perfect. But why would this be the time to sort of dump him when the community has that kind of proximity to that much power?
Yeah, listen, it was never my plan to run for Congress, but ever since Trump got elected, I've been very concerned, as many New Yorkers, many Americans have been, with the leadership or lack thereof from our Democratic leaders, right? One of my largest critiques for Hakeem maybe stems from when Joe Biden was still president, and there was a coalescing from Democratic leaders and keeping Joe Biden within the race, which, in my opinion, was one of the largest reasons or results of why Donald Trump got elected. Since then, I've been very critical of how Democrats have been leading, especially our leadership, in terms of pushing back against the right. It really stems a lot from, the donors who make up, sometimes own our Democratic Party. Hakeem's top 5 donors are AIPAC, MetLife, BlackRock, and a couple other banks, right? And while it is important to Black people to elect leaders who look like us in high places, I think it's equally as important for them to have values that uphold and protect our communities. I'm very critical of our leaders and their ability to fight back, especially fight back against rising fascism and the right when their same donors have elected the people who are stripping our rights away.
Do you think it's because of his connection to those kind of donors, those kind of backers, that he's not more vocal?
Absolutely. I mean, especially in his criticism of Israel, right? I think, we have many of us have witnessed the genocide over the past couple of years. And, we have a leader who was potentially the next speaker who has failed to call it what it is. I found that he has prioritized, again, a foreign state that has participated in a genocide more than he has his own NYCHA residents who are living in disrepair. So I truly do believe that the donors have a role to play in his lack of leadership and in speaking to some of the issues that his constituents, including myself, care about.
You know, it's interesting as you say this, because I think of it, let's think of it as sort of two tracks. Let's call one the Hakeem track and the other the Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez track.
Sure.
She's got a gazillion donors from all over the world, or all over the country. She doesn't have to talk to anybody from any PAC ever, and she's flush. She's raised more money in some cycles than anybody else in Congress. That's not available to everybody. Or that's one track.
Sure.
It doesn't necessarily lead to leadership. You know, she's not chairing the major committees that she sought to. She's not, going to be Speaker of the House, that kind of a thing. And then the other track is the Hakeem track. It's could you flip a coin and say, like, it's just a particular strategy?
Sure. I mean, I think, to answer that question, Hakeem is also a very strong fundraiser within the House, outside of PAC money. I think it would be really strong for him to say no to that PAC money. I think he would be well off without that PAC money if he just relied on his own individual donors. I think I would have a lot of respect for him, as would many of his constituents, if he made that decision and then started maybe shifting on some issues that some of those PACs have asked him to take.
Okay, very interesting. So going back to the DSA for a minute, there was this moment where you were seeking their endorsement. They chose not to give it to you, and there was that meeting where Mayor Mamdani, or I guess Mayor-elect Mamdani, went and stood online and took the microphone and sort of made a case that while he likes you and he supported you and you supported him, he didn't think this was the right race for you at this time. Is that a permanent breach? Are you still in touch with him? Are you still, do you understand and respect where he was coming from, or are you guys kind of going in different directions?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I respectfully disagreed and still disagree with, the mayor's feeling about that. I found as if this race was an existential one to run, given the threat of a fascist right-wing party that has continued to grow power within the United States of America. I found this to be a step in the right direction that could have changed or been a paradigm shift for the Democratic Party as a whole. We text from time to time, and I'm here to be a partner with the mayor. We're politically aligned on many different issues. I was a very strong, loud supporter of his, aiming to get him elected, and politics is politics, and I'm looking forward to seeing where we can work together on both sides of City Hall. So
with the DSA, is that like an endorsement you saw, it didn't go your way, it happens, you just move on, or are you planning to sort of be an active member of the DSA?
Yeah, I've been an active member. I'm currently in the process of joining the Socialist in Office Committee, which is a process where I have to speak to different branches, and then there's a vote on me officially becoming a SIO, as they call it. So I'm still very much involved in the organization, believe in the cause and believe in the overall project. And again, no hard feelings between myself and the mayor. Not from my side.
Well, it's interesting. You're in an interesting position with the DSA affiliation. We recently had Sia Weaver. She was sitting right there in that chair, as a matter of fact. She got a lot of heat for past statements of basically what was the DSA position, which the sanitized, abbreviated version is that the right to a home should not be determined by profit-seeking participants in a market, in a housing market. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, well, I disagree with I think there was a statement made about, homeownership around white supremacy. I disagree with those statements, and I think I've heard Sia, distance herself from those statements as well. So I appreciated hearing that. I see the issue of displacement, and I see the issue of generational wealth as an issue that's, not just for tenants or not just for homeowners. I see it as, a overarching issue that we can all work together on making sure that we are keeping people in their homes. I don't care if you're on the right or the left, if you're a centrist or a socialist. I think we can all agree that displacement is bad. I believe that Sia believes that too, and I'm looking forward to seeing how we can overlap and work together on making sure that we prevent that from happening.
By the way, the rezoning of Atlantic Avenue, Washington to, I guess, about Nostrand, right? You got the southern or the northern part of that. Is that going to set off an influx of families and basically amount to gentrification? I mean, this is one of the dilemmas of life in central Brooklyn as I've lived it for the last half century, which is that you try and make it better, you deal with crime, you deal with economic development and everything, and it makes it a much more attractive place for people who come in, and then not everybody who helped build the community is going to enjoy the fruits of that success.
Well, my answer to our housing crisis is yes and, right? Yes to protecting homeowners from deed theft, and yes to building housing to meet our housing shortage. Bed-Stuy is already seen as a jewel that people want to move to, right? I'm sure you've been in Bed-Stuy recently. It's already happening, right? And because of that, there is a housing shortage in New York City where, a transit worker who is Black, who's been living in an apartment for 30 years, their landlord, sees a newcomer coming into the neighborhood who works for JP Morgan Chase. They can choose to charge more for that new tenant rather than the person who's been living there for 30 years on a fixed income. I see our housing crisis as one where we need to increase our supply so that the competition for the current housing stock is not creating more displacement by the inflation of rents. So I see AMUP as a step in the right direction. We've greenlit nearly 2,000 affordable units within that 4,000 plus unit project. We've identified city-owned land that's going to be 100% affordable housing for folks making 0% of the AMI. This is in an area that was deeply underutilized, right? Warehouses, there were some gas stations that weren't being used that were turning into housing, right? I don't see us taking away from the community. I see us adding more to the community while also putting a dent into the rising rents by increasing our housing stock.
Oh, it's a great project, and I'm glad. It's one of these things where I'm going to personally benefit from it. So I'll thank you. I'll thank you personally for that.
Of course.
Before I let you go, what is your plan for the future? Because of term limits, this is actually your last term in office, unless something comes along. Right?
It is, but it's 4 years, so I have a lot of time to think. Listen, I'm focused on ending deed theft. This is an issue that has been persistent within Black Brooklyn, within New York City for a long time. There has not been one concerted effort to truly stop this because of how complex it is.
Yes.
So I'm looking forward to having this be part of my legacy and really making sure that we are keeping Black homeowners within their homes.
Okay. I am in on that. There's a communications component to it.
Yes.
And sign me up to help in any way that I can.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Errol.
Thanks a lot. If you want to keep up with what's happening in New York politics and hear more conversations with the people shaping the future of New York and beyond, subscribe to our channel. And let Spectrum News be your resource for balanced, in-depth political coverage, elections, and issues that matter to you.